Forget all you know about podcasts. We welcome you to an experience uniquely different. Please join us for our coverage of all entertainment on the fringe of society. The candles are lit, the lights are down low. It is now time to welcome our host as he steps up to the pulpit. The sacrifice has been prepared for the midnight black mass.
Ghastly greetings, groovy ghoulies. A new year is upon us, and that means it's time for new adventures and an all-new episode of the Midnight Black Mass. Hope you enjoyed the holiday break. I know I did. Little relaxation time, little rest time for the Reverend. Stayed pretty busy in terms of wrestling, too. Made my return to Anarchy Wrestling. We heard it did not close down. I managed Azrael and Strychnine to my 5th tag team holding the Anarchy Tag Team Championship. And by my count, though that would disagree with the Title Histories website that I read, but I'd like to think my memory's still okay regarding that type of thing. I believe that's the 8th Anarchy Tag Team Championship victory that a team I have managed has held. So, in any event, it was a good time at the end of the year. Said farewell to Franklin Dove, the owner of Anarchy, and made my annual appearance there in the Church of Southern Wrestling. We found out that they've been purchased by a man named Charles Ansuch, who is also the promoter of Southern Fried Wrestling, who co-won Promotion of the Year for Anarchy, or with Anarchy rather, in the Georgia Wrestling History Year-End Awards. And so looks like he's going to be taking the thing forward, and hope to be back down there real soon. As I always enjoy visiting the Church of Southern Wrestling. It is home down there in Cornelia, Georgia. I would be nobody today if it was not for that little building, and nor would a whole lot more people way more famous than me. So big props to Charles Anschutz for coming in there and saving the day at the last minute, who he informed me is a listener of the Midnight Black Mass. So hello, Charles. Hope you're listening. There, you got your very own shout out. Are you happy? A big show tonight, kicking off the new year. Tried to line up a lot of guests for you, as we headed towards the end of the year. Kind of hit a drought. Not necessarily on guests, but on scheduling. I've always got a line of guests waiting to come on the show, but sometimes the scheduling just doesn't work out. And that's what happened. But we've got lots of guests scheduled coming up for the upcoming weeks. Tonight, a true journeyman veteran of the territories, one and only Pat Rose, is going to be on the show. Really looking forward to sitting down with Pat and talking old school wrestling. There's a guy working just about every major territory there ever was, and just so thrilled to finally get him on the show. We've been talking about this a long time. Pat's a good buddy of mine, and really glad to make that happen. So you are in for a treat. No better way, really, to kick off a 2015, in my opinion, than having a guy the caliber of Pat Rose next week on the program to talk about their new television slot. They just debuted this past week on Destination America from Impact Wrestling. Gunner is going to be making his second appearance on the program. He was an early guest on the show, but now he's coming back to talk about what's going on with him today, the here and now. So, brand new interview with Gunner next week. Following that, one of the most decorated female wrestlers in independent wrestling history. That's right, Lufisto is coming on the show in 3 weeks. So we've really got just a whole host of folks for you, and more coming up. Air Paris is coming back for a part 2. We got a couple of surprise guests that he's working on for me that I'm really anxious to announce something about. All that to come. Thank you so much for your support. 2015, I hope to be a banner year for the Midnight Black Mass, one of the longest pro wrestling, almost said one of the longest pro wrestling podcasts. And when Bill Barron's is on the show, that's damn straight. But no, one of the longest running podcasts for professional wrestling going. I think one of the only others, there's probably a few more, but the biggest one that comes to mind is, of course, Colt Cabana's Art of Wrestling. I think that was probably the first popular wrestling podcast. Certainly not one of the first ones that ever happened. There was predating wrestling podcasts over at the Who's Slamming Who website that Tommy Fierro had ran. I know there was a lot of guests that they had there, and Jim Cornette did a little brief podcast there for a little while, but he took a break and later came back with his own, with the Jim Cornette Experience that he's doing now. But the Midnight Black Mass, for all intents and purposes, going in our 5th year now, one of the longest running pro wrestling podcasts in America, or the world for that matter. So glad you could join us. What's going on with the Rev? Well, still active, still out there. You can book me if you'd like. I'm available as a manager or an announcer. Just shoot me an email at dragonsrejects@gmail.com. You can also follow me on Twitter at dragonsrejects. And we'll talk turkey about bringing the Reverend Dan the Dragon Wilson or the Devil's Rejects to your town, because we're here and we'd love to do some business with you. Had a good year in 2014, marking my 16th year in the professional wrestling industry. Crazy. 10th year anniversary of the Devil's Rejects. Also crazy. So 2015 is huge, and I'm very optimistic for what it holds. Do I have a New Year's resolution? Nah. I said New Year's resolutions could go take a hike. I say, why set yourself up for failure? Try to make a self-improvement a daily battle. Have a better year than the last. That's my only resolution for 2015. So that's what's going on with me. You can catch me next at Empire Wrestling in Rossville, Georgia on January the 24th for a long, cold winter. Also be returning to Deep Southern Championship Wrestling in Blue Ridge, Georgia very soon. Got some dates that will be announced very shortly on that. We've already come to an agreement to return there. So that's all I got for the intros right now. There's a whole lot more going on. You can catch Empire at EmpireWrestling.net or on Twitter or Facebook. On Twitter, they're at EmpirePW. On Facebook, Empire Wrestling. You can catch Deep Southern Championship Wrestling at dscw.org or on Twitter at dscw101. Both promotions doing big things also in 2015. Glad to be involved with them. Of course, I'm bound to make a return to Anarchy Wrestling at some point, and there's a whole lot more in the works as well. So, with all that being said, get a brief Revs rant in here before we get our guests on. I'm trying to keep the language down to a minimum here in honor of my buddy Pat. I know, he's a church-going guy. He's got a family, and he's probably going to be sharing this interview, so I don't want to embarrass him with my extremely foul and vulgar mouth that normally comes across on this. This may be one of the only PG-rated editions of the Midnight Black Mass ever. But I do have a bit of a rant, and so let's see if I can edit this to keep it in the PG level. The rant this week is on the Lucky Sperm Club. And you say, well, what in the hell is that, Dan? And I say, well, it's a phrase that has come up lately, mainly by people, brought up by people in the wrestling business, in regards to people who essentially were born into a job. And in 2015, in an era where full-time jobs making a lot of money, as many who hoped and dreamed to be involved in wrestling would do, there are very few of them. So there's a bit of resentment towards people in this Lucky Sperm Club. So what I'd like to do here is examine in the rant this week why members of that club may catch the ire of their contemporaries in the wrestling business. There's certainly no denying that some of the greatest stars in professional wrestling history came from wrestling families. If not for the so-called Lucky Sperm Club, it is doubtful we'd have stars like Terry or Dory Funk, Bret Hart, The Rock, Yokozuna, Randy Orton, Bob Orton, Jake Roberts, Barry Windham, Goldust, Jeff Jarrett, Rob Fuller. The list just goes on and on and on and on. And I could keep going, but it's foolish to say, certainly, that second and third and even fourth generation wrestlers are not vastly important to the industry and a building block of it. But when the conflict comes in is on the other side of the coin. It's when it's generally accepted that wrestling's a social business, so it's very much who you know that is very important. When you're born into a wrestling family, you simply have more opportunities, whether or not you've earned them, more opportunities than the average guy off the street, that is. George Goulis would be the classic example where the debate still rages that, he would be everything that was wrong with someone being a member of the Lucky Sperm Club. I've talked to George. He seems like a nice enough guy, so I'm not trying to throw him under the bus. This is just repeating what I've heard from veterans and old timers. That's a generally accepted opinion in the sport that, George Goulis had little to no talent and was pushed to the very top of the card and ultimately killed the business in Chattanooga. Will that ever be proven on paper? Probably not, but that at least is the commonly accepted logic. So look at here in 2015, I dare say that 25%, if not more, of WWE's current roster and an even higher percentage of developmental were brought about by said Lucky Sperm. So it's just interesting, I guess, with the old systems no longer around to make them deserve the opportunities where they love the business and they live it and breathe it and sleep it. Many of them are talentless children of wrestlers who didn't want to be in wrestling in the first place. The WWE cycles through those guys like used underwear. Many of them avoid the due-paying process altogether or are pulled through it kicking and screaming like petulant children. So that's the downside. I think, you say, well, in the old days that could have been prevented, but I just brought up George Goulis, so maybe not. But certainly now, a lot of times people will call in those favors and guys who really just simply don't deserve an opportunity will get it. And I think that's where a lot of the resentment comes from. Certainly to take nothing away from second generation guys, especially guys who wanted to be professional wrestlers their whole life. Brings up an interesting comparison with Bray Wyatt. His gimmick is very similar to what I do and have done since before he was even in the wrestling business. People often ask me about the similarities between us, and if I get mad or if I think people think that he maybe bit me a little bit, or if people think that, maybe, I doubt he even knows who I am, but if he did, it's flattery, but whatever. What I'm saying is he's talented. I'm actually a fan of him. But the difference between what me and him do is completely opposite ends of the spectrum. I am very genuine in this role because I have lived as an outcast. Bray, not so much. I mean, Mr. Rotunda, as I could call him, maybe he's never going to know what it's like to be what he portrays on television. This guy was a football player. He was a failed jock, essentially, whose daddy got him a job, and now he plays the scary guy on TV. His many talents, no doubt, got him to the next level, and he certainly deserves to be there. I think he's shown that he's got the ability to hang with everybody. Like I said, I'm not trying to diss the guy. I'm a fan. But I am saying he'd never gotten the spot if it wasn't for who he was. So if you think about that long enough, I think you can get to the bottom of why some people understand that. I think you can maybe understand why people resent the Lucky Sperm Club just a little bit. People say, well, what about Gypsy Joe? Well, Joe is not my blood. He's family to me, but he's never gotten me a job anywhere. I've been very adamant to make my own accomplishments away from him. Has he helped me? Immensely. But, Joe has always been a rebel and an outlaw and a wild spirit. So he made his own name. I'm doing something totally different. I'm not going to try to ride his coattails. Certainly, if I can bring him up as a point of conversation with someone who knows him and likes him, it's an easy way to break the ice. But it's not, he's never gotten me a job. And it's also way different than someone whose parents are ingrained into the WWE system and can make one phone call and get you a contract. So I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm actually saying it's a vital part of the wrestling business. But I think just examining the situation from that perspective, you can understand why some people are a little bit resentful of guys who are born into the business. Because I guess like everybody, about half of them deserve to be there and about half of them don't. But then that would be speaking for the industry in its entirety and as a whole. So just some off-the-cuff thoughts from the Revs brain here to kick off the 2015 Revs Rant in the Midnight Black Mass. That's all I got for you right now. We're going to take a break. We're going to hear from our sponsors, and we're going to be right back to talk old school wrestling 101. We're talking Mid-South. We're talking Georgia Championship. We're talking Puerto Rico. We're talking Memphis. We're talking with the one and only Pat Rose when we come back.
High, but not too high. This is George Carlin. I'm sitting here. I have on a yellow hat, a pink shirt, dark sunglasses, and an earring in my ear. And I'm going to tell you not to get into heavy drugs. Well, it sounds bizarre, I know, but there are other things to do with your life, other things to help you make it. Heavy drugs make it all worse, and they help you die.
Whether you're having an autograph session, personal appearance, or live event, we got just the person you need to contact for all of those needs. SBI Bookings is home of some of the best stars in the wrestling industry today. They provide you with the best talent this business has to offer, from Kevin Nash, Larry Zbyszko, Scott Steiner, and many, many more. So who will you contact next time you're planning an event? The men of SBI Bookings. Check them out at sbibookings.com.
And we're back on the Midnight Black Mass. My guest at this time is a former NWA Southeastern, Mid-American, and Alabama heavyweight tag team champion. He's also a junior heavyweight champion with the World Wrestling Council. Had a storied, impressive career over the territory days of wrestling in the 70s and 80s. Now conquering the waters as a fisherman. Ladies and gentlemen, the one and only Pat Rose. Welcome to the show, my friend.
Hey, how you doing, Dan? Pleasure to be here, brother.
Hey, thank you for joining me. I'm glad that you could take a little bit of time to talk some old school wrestling. I know you're putting a whooping on them fish out there on the water, but we're glad to get you to turn back the clock just a minute to talk about your career. Very much looking forward to this today.
This is going to be fun, man. I've had my fried Spam sandwich and my bowl of canned chili. Been to church, so I'm ready to go. Let's get it, buddy.
Outstanding. Well, Pat, you had an impressive career that spanned a couple of different decades, but let's go back before that. I know the cliche question in wrestling interviews is how did you get started into the business, and we're going to touch on that. But I want to know, even before that, going back prior to even before that was a thought, what lit your fire and made you fall in love with professional wrestling?
Oh, good question, Dan. Good question. You know, I grew up here in Chattanooga, Tennessee, and Chattanooga, Tennessee was the, in quotations, hotbed of professional wrestling, if you will. I was a young kid, I don't know, 11, 12 years old. I had a cousin that used to go and take me to the Memorial Auditorium about 1972. And I would see, oh, my God, Jackie Fargo, Roughhouse Fargo, Don Fargo, Crazy Luke Graham, Pepe Lopez, and Big Bad John, the spoilers and interns, what matches they had at the auditorium. And I'm going to say a lot of if they're hardcore young fans that are listening to Midnight Mass, they'll understand. But if they're just getting in, they won't have a clue as to who I'm talking about. So to go back to your question, that's where it started in 1972, going to the Memorial Auditorium, man. I would sit there, I would watch it, but I would study it. You understand what I'm saying, Dan?
Absolutely, I understand. I was a fan of that ilk myself during my days going to ringside. So, you know, there's just something about that live atmosphere of wrestling, the smell of the popcorn, the energy and the excitement of the crowd. Of course, back in those days, a lot of blood and guts, but that's part of what turned me on to it as well, you know.
Oh yeah, man, and and when I was a kid as well, they would bring up guys from Atlanta. It was when Turner was kind of getting hot too, and they would bring up guys from Atlanta like Ole and Gene Anderson, Abdullah the Butcher. When Abdullah would come in, I was a kid and I wouldn't sit on the floor because I was scared of Abdullah the Butcher, man. I had to travel with him in Puerto Rico and over to Barbados and stuff, and I told him, I said, you used to scare the crap out of me, brother. And he just laughed, bought me a drink, and laughed,
That's tremendous. I have a very similar experience with Abdullah. He was also one of the first people that I saw in magazines before I ever saw him live, and he just fascinated me. The pictures, the black and white images where he's just covered in blood and just butchering somebody, living up to his name. Of course, later I also got to know Abdullah once I got into business, and it's funny when you get to know the real Abdullah because he's such a soft-spoken, gentlemanly guy that you would never put two and two together that he was this maniacal killer.
No, you believed it, man. He made it real. I mean, you didn't want to be around when he went crazy and went out through the fans and stuff like that. You better haul butt to the daggum goal circle up in the balcony or something just to be safe from Abdullah,
Absolutely. So the fire was lit. You pursued it. I saw you were trained by a man named Ken Hawk out of Cleveland, Tennessee. So take us into that experience a little.
Well, Ken Hawk, Cleveland, Tennessee. Ken Hawk was the manager of the original Samoans, T.O. and Tapu, back in the 70s. And this was around 79, and I was 19 years old. And I had wrestled in junior high and high school and, did okay. I wasn't a great amateur wrestler. I didn't want to be. I knew where my heart was. I wanted to be a professional wrestler. And when I would have, and let me go back to this story, and then we'll get to Ken Hawk. When I wrestled in high school at Dade County or Northwest Georgia, I would have a picture of Mr. Wrestling 2 on my gym bag. And every Wednesday or Monday or something, we had wrestle-offs, and that's where you had to fight for your spot to keep the starting spot. Somebody challenged you, got to kick their butt and keep the starting spot on the team. But I would have my little Wrestling 2 picture up there, and I'd turn it over, and I'd kick everybody's butt. I told 2 that story. He laughed, but I don't know if it did anything. It did, I thought it did, but whatever, But as far as getting trained, 1979, I met Ken Hawk, manager of the original Samoans, and I just asked him, I said, Ken, I want to get in this because I thought I knew, but nobody confirmed. You understand what I'm saying?
Right on.
Yeah. And he took me to the washboard drive, an old broke-down ring, trained me for 2 weeks. I was one of the lucky ones, trained me for 2 weeks. And boom, I was on Channel 12 TV. My first match, and I've said this many times, I love him to death, God, R.I.P. Ken Lucas. Ken Lucas was my first match. And I get to go back every month and do Seth Hookle, Pat Rose, and Patrick Core. And at that same spot, nothing's changed. Nothing's changed, Dan. You'll have to come down with me. Go down to the dressing rooms where the guys was, the whole deal. But I stand in the spot, and I had Camden stand in the spot when I was 19 years old. And I looked over to Ken, and I said, Ken, you're going to take care of me, ain't you, man? He said, don't worry about it, kid. And we had a great match. We did the top wrist lock deal on the mat, and he would fight up, and I'd pull his hair. He'd fight up, and I'd pull his hair. And then he got me with a sleeper and put me to sleep. The sleeper's real, Dan.
Oh, I know. That's wonderful recollections on Ken Lucas. We had Les Thatcher on the program a few months ago, and it was right after Ken had passed, and he shared some great words on his times and experiences with just what a great hand and great wrestler that he was, and a great dude, and glad to hear some more of that here on the program with you. I know he was a big influence.
Hey, let me elaborate on on Les Thatcher, and I'm getting a call, so it's going to beep. I'm not going to answer it. But Les Thatcher, one of the best wrestlers in the business. Him, Dennis Hall, Ken Lucas, Tony Charles, Les Thornton, same kind of mat wrestling. You know, they knew how to wrestle, and that's what I did. I incorporated a little bit of mat wrestling with pro wrestling, and Les Thornton and I, man, we loved it. We had a blast wrestling each other because we'd be on the mat. I mean, Les could have stretched me at any time and killed me, stopped my breath or whatever. But he let me work. He let me do some sit-outs and some arrows and this and that. But I love their style. Les Thatcher, Dennis Hall, Ken Lucas, great wrestlers.
And that's what it's all about. And one thing, wrestling has evolved today, and it is what it is. And there's still certainly the fundamental aspects of it being wrestling there that still make it great at times. But I really would like to see more of that mat wrestling in the modern era.
I totally agree. You know, we went to WWE. They were just in town Friday night, January 9th. And we get front row tickets because I got a 9-year-old son. So I'm a mark again. I don't have nothing against that. I love it. I love it. Got to say hi to Charles Robinson, one of the youngest looking, oldest guys in the world. And they were doing the tackle, drop down, leapfrog, you know, high spots that you would see Buzz Sawyer do. And it looked good, man. And the bumps looked good. I seen Dustin Rhodes. He was there. What's his name? Stardust, Goldust, whatever. Old school, man. Dustin's good. Cody's good. They understand. They get it. Their dad's Dusty Rhodes. They have no choice. The younger guys.
It's hard to believe that Dustin has had almost a 30-year career.
Oh, my God, man. And he still looks great and still moves great.
Yeah, it just blows my mind. Sorry, I had to interject that. It just still fascinates me that he's still in that good a shape, still on a good spot on TV, and has been working that long. He's not broke down.
Yeah, that's true. He'll be in the WWE Hall of Fame. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think so. Well, you know, there's a good segue. Dustin Rhodes, great tag wrestler, and currently in a tag team with his brother. Speaking of tag teams, that was your specialty. Looking over your storied career, your most success was always in the tag team division, and boy, did you have a who's list of tag team partners. So let's just talk a minute about each of them. There's just so much to go over here. First of all, I know you teamed with Rocky Brewer in Chattanooga a little bit, but really in Memphis, you were part of the original Heavenly Bodies with Dr. Tom Pritchard, managed by Sherri Martel. Can you talk about working with those folks?
Oh, my Lord. That was fun. And, you know, Tom Pritchard, Sherri Martel, great partners. Me and Tom worked good together. Sherri Martel was screaming and hollering. I'd look at her and what the heck are you doing? But I understood what she was doing, but I would look at her like she was nuts. And it was funny, man. And we would travel all over the place together. And back then, that's what it was about. You traveled together. You took care of each other, you know. And I would wear Tom out on Hank Williams Jr., and he'd wear me out on freaking Bon Jovi. But some of the matches, let me tell you about some of the matches we had, man. We were lucky enough to work with, the fabulous ones, Steve Kern and Stan Lane. And main event in towns with Steve Kern and Stan Lane. And, man, sell the place out. You know, I don't know if we did it, whatever, but it was sold out. You know what I'm saying? And I'm going to say, heck yeah, we had something to do with it because it was the fabulous ones, Pat Rose, Tom Pritchard, and Sherri Martel. We got to work with the Fantastics. We got to work with Dundee and Lawler. It was fun, man. And then Tom broke his ankle. So they put me with frickin' Tony Falk. Imagine that. Tony was a good guy, man, but, you know, he was a good guy. That's all I'm going to say.
He was a really nice guy. But, you know, hard to replace a talent the level of Tom Pritchard. Sherri Martel is like... Oh, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, I was just going to say, you know, I would be on his butt, man. And as far as Tony, because I was pissed off that Pritchard had to go, and then, you know, that just done it for the team.
Right. At least Sherri probably is one of my only female influences as a manager, but like her and Luna Vachon, I have to say, certainly played a distinct part in what the Reverend became, actually. And just what was Sherri like as a person?
She was a sweetheart, man. Cared about everybody. I don't remember her saying a foul word to anybody. Very nice person in the dressing room, very professional, very professional on the road. You know, I was coming home from work one day. I worked at Mohawk Industries for 20 freaking years. And I was coming home from work one day and heard a guy from Arkansas call me and say, Pat Rose, Sherri Martel died. And I just had to pull over, man. 49 years old, beautiful person, sweetheart. She would help anybody. I miss her. I miss talking to her. I'd keep in touch with her, keep in touch with Pritchard still, and Randy Rose and everybody, but a sweetheart of a person, Dan, you know that.
Yeah, we never really crossed paths. Like, we were around in the business at the same time, and there were a couple of shows where she was at after I was gone, or she was there before I got there, but we never actually crossed paths. It was one of those people I just always wanted to meet and tell them thanks, you know, but never got to. So that's very sad. But as far as the other tag team partners, man, you had some. You just mentioned one, Randy Rhodes, teamed as your cousin in the Southeastern Territory. Of course, fans know him from the original Midnight Express, probably most famously, and their huge feud with the Jim Cornette Midnight Express, as well as the run in AWA. But what was Randy like as a partner? And to me, just looking at what footage is available, it seemed like you and Randy had the best chemistry of all your partners. Do you care to comment on that as well?
We were good, man. We were good together. You know, I went into Southeastern Championship as Mr. Wrestling number 1 and 2. I know Mr. Wrestling number 1, Tim Woods, there will never be a Mr. Wrestling number 1, but that's what they called me. That's what Ron Fuller wanted. And you know, I understood in my heart who Mr. Wrestling number 1 was. That's Tim Woods. But they brought us in, me and 2, and we worked for a little while. We did good together. We were a good team. They unmasked me on TV, and Randy Rose just happened to be in the ring with us, and that's where the Rose cousins started. And Randy was a great learning experience for me. Well, let me go back before. No, that's right. My memory is running with me now. Okay. It was Randy Rose and Pat Rose, the Rose cousins. Great learning experience. We had the heat, brother. They hated us. We've been in fights about coming out in Boutwell Auditorium, walking to the ring. Some mark hit me right in the freaking jaw. We pulled him over the rail, started beating the crap out of him, me, him, and Bill Ash. And come to find out, the old boy had a 25 in his freaking pocket, so we could have been shot right there. But Randy was the talker. And it flipped Jimmy Cornette out. I've seen Cornette at the Rome Fan Fest. And he said, Pat, you and Randy used to use that power bomb thing off the top. He loved it. He loved it. Evidently somebody used to use it with him, and I don't remember who it was. Maybe the Midnight, I don't know. But we stole that, I guess. I don't know. But it got over for us. And Randy was the talker, and he was teaching me how to talk. I had to work down and the heat down and the psychology down. I just had to, learn how to talk on the mic, and two was teaching me how to talk. So, man, it was great. And then after Randy, it was me and Arn Anderson. We held the Southeastern Tag Championship as well, and we were okay as a team, but Arn was almost getting ready to go to Charlotte, and history was made with him. You've seen that. I mean, he's the greatest friggin' wrestler in the friggin' world as far as I'm concerned. And still talk to him every now and again. And he was in Chattanooga Friday night. Got to see him, talk to him. But I was lucky at Southeastern. They liked us. We worked hard. We made a lot of money and had a good time. That's what it's all about.
Yeah, absolutely. So you would go from the who's who of tag team partners to the who's who of promoters. You were on some major wrestling cards, my man. Looking down here through the 80s, you're on the last Battle of Atlanta card, of course, that had the Buzz Sawyer and Tommy Rich main event. And so, of course, the big thing there is Ole Anderson and Dusty would have been probably in charge at that time. I'd say Ole probably more so. What was that experience like, and what was he like as a boss?
Oh, man. Ole liked me. Ole liked my body. Ole liked how I worked. Ole liked that I could wrestle, that I could, amateur wrestle. And he liked me. So he would put me on the cards at the Omni, although I was doing TV. He would put me on the cards at the Omni, and yeah, man, I was on the last Battle of Atlanta card, wrestled Bruno Sammartino Jr. at the time, David Sammartino, and we had a good match, and at the end, David got to win, but he comes over and he raises my hand and shows respect, and I admired that, but the Tommy Rich, Buzz Sawyer deal, Dan, you went back, you're a mark. You're a freaking mark. You're out there watching the match. Tommy Rich, as far as I'm concerned, was other than Ricky Morton, was the greatest babyface of all time. Tommy's still wrestling today, and when you see his picture up, people say, oh, he's out. Well, of course he's out of shape. He's 60 years old. Look what he did. Remember what he did, not what he is today, and he has to work. Look what he did for the business. That's what it's about.
Yeah. Man. Absolutely. He was one of the greatest baby faces of all time. I got to work the NWA 60th anniversary card at the Phillips Arena with him. And after the show was over, and, it wasn't like a huge house for the Phillips Arena. It's probably 3,000 or 4,000 in there, which is like cavernous in that giant place. But it was still a good house. But of course, it was a big success. Everybody was happy. All the old timers were happy to see each other and everything. But Tommy had wrestled Abdullah on the undercard, and of course it was like a bloody mess. He had a bandage on his head. He had a powder blue suit on, and he's looking over the empty arena, and he just looks over at me and goes, "Hey, this is still a house that Wildfire built." I said, "You'll get no argument from me, sir."
Love it, man. And I Ole took me on a tour of the Philippines. We went to Japan and Manila and just all over the place with me and Larry Zbyszko, and I'm thinking Sherri Martel was there, but Rick McGraw, and me and Rick McGraw hit it off. He called me Jack and Coke for some reason. You can figure that out. But we hit it off, man, and he was in Pensacola. When I went to Pensacola, I was in Louisiana, and Arn called me, man, and I'm all over the place. Just bear with me. And Arn called me and said, "Hey, man, get to Pensacola. It's time to go to work." And I said, "Okay, man." So I gave him a notice there and went on. But Ole took me to the Philippines, and we were there with Les Thornton, Joe Lightfoot, Larry Zbyszko, Rick McGraw, just a whole host of us. Ole was there for a while, and it was fun. And we had a good time, man. Made some money. It was 1983, Christmas of 1983, man. I remember that like it was yesterday. And let me tell you this story. of what I'm thinking, what if question, my what if question. And everybody has one that hadn't made it. And I was doing Atlanta TV, and I did Atlanta TV. I was a fixture on there, man, every week. I didn't care. I wanted to wrestle, and I wrestled TV, got a win with Dale Veazey, one of the top baby faces, enhancement guys back then, if you will, and got a win over Dale Veazey. And I was walking back through the control room, and Oldie and Flair was sitting there. And they called me over and said, "Hey, Pat Rose, come here." I said, "Yes, sir." They said, "Hey, what are you doing, man? What do you do for a living?" I said, "Well, I do the Omni, do the TV, and I got a job back home. I was a security guard, believe it or not, at McKee Bakery in Ottawa." But, they said, "Hey, you want to go full time?" And I said, "No, Dan." I said, "No." And that's my, I guess, what if story. Tommy Rich was calming down and about to go away, and you never know what could have happened. The body was in shape, the work was good. What could have happened? Gordon Soley loved me, so what do you do?
Yeah, I think we all have one of those. I got a couple. Oh, man, I really wish I would have said yes to that for, whatever reason. I was stupid and said no. One opportunity it was nothing like huge, like nothing was guaranteed. But when they opened up the Deep South territory, I got offered to be the lead play-by-play announcer, and I was in a band at the time and just kind of focusing on that. And so I told them no, of course, like an idiot. And then Ray Gordy called me a few years ago and was like, "Hey, you want to come down to Tampa? They're looking for an announcer for FCW," which, of course, went on to be NXT, and I actually was having some legal issues at the time, so I just rather did not deal with it, and was like, I'll get you later. And, of course, those opportunities don't often ring twice.
Yeah, my Lord. Yeah, I understand. I feel you, brother.
But you look at 83, one of the greatest years in the wrestling business. But then I'm looking down this list here, and we go to 1985, probably my favorite all-time year as a fan, just to, go back and watch everything that happened in that year. It was just magnificent. You were on one of the famous Bill Watts Superdome shows in 1985. What was it like working for the Cowboy, first of all, and then to get to work in Louisiana at the Dome?
Oh, my God. It was great. Went in my first week, man. I worked 4 days and made $3,500 payoff. And I was like, what? And, it was great. Everybody lived in Alexandria, Pineville, Louisiana. And this was the time Rock and Roll and Midnight were tearing it, flipping up. Here's some of the guys in the territory. Rock and Roll and Midnight, Jim Duggan, Junkyard Dog, Akbar, Kamala coming through, Jerry Gray from Florida, Buddy Landell, Butch Reed, and that was my traveling boys, Buddy Landell and Butch Reed. Loved them, traveled with Midnight, the whole deal. Working for the Cowboy was the best experience of my life. Jerry Gray and I mostly rode together, and we would take Grizzly Smith. Do you remember him?
Oh, yeah. The father of Jacob Snake Roberts and Cowboy Sam Houston.
And he is the only guy that I know that can sleep in a car sitting straight up. I mean, he'll sleep for miles. You think he's dead or something. He's over there sleeping. But, man, I'm going to tell you what. Being on that Superdome card was the biggest, other than the last Battle of Atlanta, was the next biggest card I've ever been on. I was in the New Orleans Saints dressing room, putting my boots on, and down the hallway comes this big entourage. Muhammad Ali used to hang out with this big black guy, older man. I forget his name, and I know his face. I see it in my head right now, but I was putting the boots on. I seen out the peripheral vision Muhammad Ali coming down the hallway, and I'm thinking, well, he's just going to pass and go on. But he stopped at me and did that little sound by my ear, right? And I turn around and we square off like we're boxing and stuff, and I got to shake his hand and tell him hello and this and that. Got my picture made with him, so that was a real honor to meet him, and just to be on the card and work with Mike Jackson. Mike Jackson's one of the greatest wrestlers ever. Still wrestling today and can still go today, man. Jackson kept his shape and body, but Superdome, loved it. I rode down with Jimmy Cornette, and Jimmy and I went shopping like two little girls. We had a ball, man. We had a blast.
That's outstanding. Cornette's like my all-time hero, probably in the business of people. Like, as far as managers, I didn't model my style after him necessarily because there was already one Cornette, but I stole many of his things, just as far as mechanics and things. But yeah, that's amazing. Look at that great litany of promoters that you worked for. You were actually brought up just a couple of weeks ago on the Jim Ross podcast. You were mentioned on the Cornette and Jim Ross podcast in the same week, so you were getting some major publicity out there.
Cool.
Jim Ross put you over really huge. He actually said that you were one of the most underrated hands of your day. And his guest was Bob Holly, and he had a story on there about him leaving the territory. I would say he threw you under the bus, but he, as most stories are geared to do, they're geared to make the person telling them look better. So, what is your side of that?
All right, man. And I called him. I said, Bob, what are you doing? I said, did I really get mad? Because I don't remember it. And he said I did. And I said, man, I'm sorry. That was selfish of me. But I don't remember it. But if he said I did, I guess I did. I saved his career in a roundabout way. You realize that, don't you? If he'd have went to AWA, he probably never went to WWE.
Yeah, you didn't see a lot of those underneath AWA guys at the end going on to much. Where's Ricky Rice?
I'm responsible for Bob Holly's illustrious career in WWE, man. He needs to thank me. But, no, really, I heard that, and I'm thinking, God, did I do that? What a freaking idiot. And I called Bob, and I said, Bob, did I do that? And he said, yeah, man, you got mad. I said, man, I'm sorry. That was totally selfish of me, and I apologized to him. And that's not me, man. And I tried to get a hold of Jim Ross after that, because that's not me. I didn't think that was me, but evidently it is. But, I apologize for that, man. That's totally ridiculous, But I guess I did it.
Well, hey, it's hard to remember going back to these things, and we react often on the spur of the moment, but I just wanted to give you the opportunity to present your side of it here, since that had already been out there. But,
well, I guess there's nothing to say, man. I mean, geez, but
oh, absolutely,
whatever.
Right.
But old Bob's coming down to go fishing with me, man. So we're cool.
Awesome. Well, that's great to hear. One other thing I wanted to touch on, because you were a key person in this demographic of people during the late 80s and early 90s, and they don't really use this type of talent anymore, but I think it would be beneficial if they did. They look like they're starting to bring back a little bit. Call them jobbers, call them enhancement guys, call them whatever you want. Guys on the bottom of the card that are there to get other people over and make them look good. And you had a great run with every major company you can imagine. Once your main in-ring days were done, you were still out there tearing it up, making guys look like $1 million. So can you just, as you transition into that period of your career, can you, looking back on it, talk about what an importance that role is in the overall scheme of the wrestling world?
That role is very important. they take me and I'm working with WCW, and they want to put Rob Van Dam with me, first match. I don't know what it was, 93. They knew that I could give him a good match and calm him down and make him look good. That was my job. That's important. Setting the tone, even at a house show, if you're that opening match, want to set the tone and have the best match you can have with whoever it is, whether it be a freaking Mop Handle or a freaking Rob Van Dam. It don't matter. Have a good match. And they're going to listen to me, even though he was Rob Van Dam. I had the experience and the time in the ring. He was going to listen to me, or I was going to eat him alive. And he listened to me, and he was a good guy, and look at him. What a career. Work with Kevin Nash. Am I responsible for Kevin Nash? In a roundabout way. He was a greenhorn when I met him at WCW. They would put him with me. They would put The Undertaker with me. They would put all the guys that hadn't made it yet with me because they knew I would take the bumps and make them look good. That was my job. I didn't have a problem with it. I was getting paid, and I knew I was on the way out, and doing that just kept me in it longer, and, I had no problem with it. But, Jody Hamilton, even Vince, put me with people that I could make look good. Take the Road Warriors, for example. You got them coming in, and this was earlier in my career, but I was the Road Warriors just about, and I don't know, I'm not going to say first match, but one of the top, earlier matches. And if you'd notice, when they had worked guys that were scared to freaking death of them, they would have to kill them. I mean, and when they would work with me, it would be a nice, crisp bump. You understand what I'm saying, Dan?
Right, absolutely, yeah.
Good for them, So, as far as that, I was fine with it, man. You got to have those guys. Barry Horowitz made a living at it, Yeah,
absolutely he did. And, guys, you can really tell some guys' lack of knowledge today when they try to use the term jobber. Typically internet pundits try to use the word jobber as an insult. It's like, no, those guys are team players, and they're out there to make your stars look good, and they're vital to the wrestling experience as a whole. And even though you don't see them much nowadays, looks like the payroll's going down up there, and they're having to readjust things, and we're already starting to see some indie guys brought in enhancement roles again. So I don't think that's something that's gone away forever, personally.
Right, I agree with you. We were at the matches Friday night, like I said earlier, and you're sitting there, and opening match. I don't know. That was my spot. Opening match, third match, that was my spot. You know what I'm saying? And you're thinking, well, shoot, I would have these people unloading. And you turn around and you look at the people, and it hits your heart, It hits your heart, man, that it's over. And I understand that, and that's cool. But what you could have did in the ring, But I'm sorry, man.
No, man. I appreciate you sharing such personal stuff with me, and it's something that doesn't last forever. And I think guys in the business now can take a heed of that. You better appreciate it while it's here, because one day it's going to be somebody else out there, and that's it. But that's part of the cycle. And we're winding down here in time. Looks like we've got about 5 minutes left. So we'll start, kind of winding the interview down. But I really appreciate you coming on. I do want to ask, do you have any desire to still be involved? I know you're doing the fishing thing, and I want you to plug anything you want to plug here coming up after you finish this, but do you have any desire to maybe work as an agent or in a learning capacity?
I would be, I would. I think I've got something that I could share. Heck yeah, I would love to. Do I see the opportunity? Probably not. But, if somebody hears this and I would work for only WWE, but you know how that goes, man. Well, we're doing a radio show set to Uncle Pat Rose. It's on ESPN 105.1 The Zone here in Chattanooga. It's on Armed Forces Radio, the voice of the veterans. And if you guys would do something for me, our president is a piece of garbage, but that's just my opinion. Go out, and if you see a veteran, if you see some of the troops, if you see a policeman, go out and shake his hand and tell him thank you for your service, man. I do that so much, and it's important these days because America's changed, man. It's we got to get the patriotic back in America. You understand what I'm saying? But, Armed Forces Network, Reno Viola Radio Network out of Canada, numerous stations across the country. We've got great sponsors. We've got Pat Rose Bass Fishing Guide Service. If you guys want to book a trip with me on Nickajack, Chickamauga, or Lake Gunnersville, this is God's country down here in Chattanooga. Give me a call, 423-314-4541. That's my cell. We'll go fishing, brother. Dan, let me say this, man. We didn't mention Gypsy Joe. Gypsy Joe was one of the greatest wrestlers in the business. Let me tell you something. When I got in, I got put with Gypsy Joe, and every night he would beat the crap out of me. And I wouldn't let him know. I wouldn't let him know that he was hurting me, and I wanted to run. I'd fight him back, and I swear, Dan, I tried to hurt him, but you can't hurt Big Gypsy, man. One of the greatest wrestlers, and I love that man more than anything in the world. Him and Tojo, they were great to me.
Yeah, he's something else, man. One of the, in my opinion, of course, is always biased, being that he's family to me, but someone who worked with him directly there back in the day. Always great to hear recollections of Gypsy Joe, and he's up in Smyrna, Tennessee now, living in an assisted living facility. So if you want to holler at him, get up with me off the air, and I'll give you his contact info.
Yeah, do that, brother. I'd love to.
Well, I suppose that this will wrap it up. I tell you, this has been one hell of an experience, and I would just hope that you would be willing to maybe come back on down the line and talk some more wrestling with us.
Buddy, I'd do it in a heartbeat. Dan, you call me anytime, man. Thank you for all you've done for me as well. You know what I'm talking about, brother. I love you.
I love you too, Pat. Thank you so much, my man, and thank you for joining the show.
See you, buddy.
Have a good one, buddy. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Pat Rose in one of the most fun times I've had interviewing any guest. I'll just go ahead and say that. I love talking that old school wrestling, and that was somebody who was right in the thick of it. Absolutely fantastic interview with Pat Rose. We're out of time, but we're back now. The first episode of 2015 concludes here on the Midnight Black Mass. Thank you for joining me. Keep one foot in the gutter and one fist in the goal. This is the Reverend, and I'll see you next week. TNA star Gunner is going to be here next week on the Midnight Black Mass.
Thank you.